The first slide, we're going to talk about housing security. So on any given night in 2024, there were over 5,000 people in Wisconsin that were experiencing homelessness. So during the 2023-24 school year, roughly 20,195 Wisconsin public school students lacked a fixed or regular place to stay at night. Wisconsin faces a shortage of more than 59,500 affordable rental homes for low-income households statewide. In Milwaukee County, 885 people were experiencing homelessness in the January 2024 point in time count. Now we'll talk a little bit about poverty. Poverty hits Milwaukee the hardest, especially for Black Milwaukeeans. So 30% of Black residents in Milwaukee live below the poverty line, which is the highest rate among major U.S. metropolitan areas. 27% of Black homeowners in Milwaukee compared to just 56 for white households, which is a 29% difference. $37,000 is the median household income for Black families in Milwaukee. That ranks us dead last among the 50 largest metropolitan areas. When you talk about people who earn over $100,000, that's only 13.4% of households that reside in Milwaukee. Poverty among Milwaukee's African American children is a whopping 38.8%, which is the third worst out of the 50 largest metropolitan areas. This is higher than the national average for Black child poverty, which is roughly 30.2%. African American home ownership in Milwaukee is just 27.5%, which we talked about earlier, ranks us dead last. Now, in order for Milwaukee or in order for Wisconsin to close that Black-white gap among African American home ownership and whites, we need roughly around 30,000 more homeowners in the state. Now, the median household income, we talked about that earlier, which is just roughly $37,000, and the 13% that earn $100,000 or more. So when we talk about Milwaukee and the things that we see in our African American communities, it's easy to see why the struggle is so real, because the poverty is real. Now, one of the things that the Wisconsin Legislative Black Caucus 2026 policy platform, our agenda is to introduce legislation that will help to combat some of the disparities that we see in these slides. Our goal is to make housing affordable for all, increase home ownership, and to protect tenants and renters from exploitation. Our priorities: developing housing affordability programs that prioritize communities with high displacement risks, such as establishing the first-time home buyers program to assist Wisconsinites purchasing their first home, and for those who have faced foreclosure. Investing in home repair programs to rehabilitate neighborhoods and prioritize safety from lead poisoning, fires, and other potential natural disasters, and prioritize renters and tenant rights and protections so that they can live in their homes with dignity and without exploitation. Next, we'll be talking about education. Nearly 90% of Wisconsin's African American population live in the following 6 major counties: Milwaukee, Dane, Racine, Kenosha, Rock County, and Waukesha County. But when we talk about the largest population of African Americans, that will be in Milwaukee, which tops 38.6%. In Wisconsin, while 1% of Wisconsin's white children live in poverty areas, we know that in Wisconsin, it's 35% of African American children, closer to 38, and 18% of Latina children do. Black children make up just 9% of the total Wisconsin public school students. Hispanic children make up approximately 13%, and 43.7% of Wisconsin public school students are economically advantaged, while 86.5% of MPS students are economically disadvantaged. One in 10 children in Wisconsin live in poverty, while 1 in 10 children live in poverty, while 3 in 10 African American children in Milwaukee live in poverty. African American children make up just 10% of the state's population if it's rounded off. A stunning 22.5% of African American youth ages 16 to 24 living in Milwaukee were not in school and did not have employment, resulting in us being ranked the third worst in the nation. Graduation rates for white students is roughly 92.7% compared to graduation rates of Black children at 71%. The gap in graduation rates between white and Black students is the largest in the country. Wisconsin also had the 47th highest gap between Black and white students in its share of adults with either a high school or bachelor's degree. Now, when we talk about education and the juvenile justice system, we are indeed at a crossroads. So, with the passage of the budget, Wisconsin is estimated to spend roughly $15,477 per child per year on average per student in public education. On child care, the legislature passed $330 million over the biennium for an estimated 288,000 children statewide. So that breaks down to roughly about $400 per child per year. But when we look at our maximum secure juvenile detention center, also known as a Type 1 facility, Lincoln Hills and Copper Lakes, the high security juvenile detention center costs roughly $912,865 per child per year. Well, we'll see a little bit later in this slide. Thank God that Governor Evers used his partial veto pen and crossed out the two, bringing that cost significantly down. But that doesn't mean that the Department of Corrections still doesn't have to pay. What it means is that the counties don't have to pay, which is exceptionally phenomenal because that cost could potentially bankrupt the counties. Now, what the legislative 2026 policy platform for education and literacy, our goal is to ensure equitable access to high quality education that prepares every child for success, regardless of their district or zip code. Our priorities are to fully fund public schools with targeted resources for schools with low literacy rate scores, expand evidence-based literacy program, including early childhood and reading intervention initiatives, strengthen accountability and transparency in voucher and charter school programs to ensure that all students benefit, and to support the development and recruitment of teachers and culturally responsive curriculum to improve outcomes and engagement. Chronic absenteeism and the criminal justice link. Now, what we know is that chronic absenteeism is categorized as missing 10% or more than 18 school days per school year. Chronic absenteeism is also a strong predictor of involvement with youth in the criminal justice system. Data from the 2023-24 school year shows that Black students in Wisconsin, including a high concentration of Milwaukee public school students, have chronic absenteeism rates of 47.9 to 51%. 4.28 times higher for Black students than their white counterparts who had an absenteeism rate of 11.2%. 2017 Wisconsin Act 185 basically says that Lincoln Hills and Copper Lake, which is our maximum secure juvenile center, must close. It replaces both the boys and the girls center, which Copper Lake is for the girls, Lincoln Hills is for the boys, with regionally run facilities in an effort to better serve youth closer to home, with the closure set for 2021. We know that this is 2026, so we missed that deadline. So in 2026, the facility served 88 youths in the facility designed to house over 500 individuals. So I believe it was 80, roughly between 80, 88 for the boys and 10 individuals for the girls. So Milwaukee and Dane County have the majority of youth housed at the facility. JFC, which is the Joint Finance Committee, passed daily rates in the last legislative budget to pay $2,501 in 2026, and that's per juvenile offender per day. So let's get that number right. And $2,758 per day in 2026, 2027. Governor Evers used his veto pen, his partial veto pen, and crossed out the two. Yay, Governor Evers. And so that brought those daily rates down to $501 in fiscal year 2026, $758 in fiscal year 2027. An 800% decrease, creating a major shortfall for the Department of Correction, but we're not going to complain about that shortfall because that was right. Still, the cost of running the facility is about $30 million a year, meaning the state has spent $150 since missing their deadline. Also, in Lincoln Hills and Copper Lakes, it's at least 2 juvenile correctional officers per every 5 juvenile, something that's unheard of at Vale Phillips and other correctional facilities around the state. Now, so the rate of Black youth in correctional placements when compared to white youth is 15 times. Jonathan Delgrave Youth Development and Care Center, which is located in Racine, it's a CERC, which means, David?
Secure residential facility. Basically. For you. Yeah.
They're responsible for that payment too. That opened May 1st, 2025. And it was new construction, completely new. Their daily rate, $1,268. That's still high, but it's a lot cheaper than the $2,500. The Vale Phillips Juvenile Justice Facility, the median household income for Black families in Milwaukee. Wait a minute, let's skip over because we're missing some of that that information. So the Vale Phillips Center had their budget was an expansion. They expanded the capacity for the number of kids that they could house. I don't have the daily rate for that because it's not, my slide is messed up for that
I
one.
know the top of my head now.
Okay, it's a lot, but oh, you do?
Yeah, you said I have Vale Phillips, right?
No, the daily rate. Do you know what the daily rate is for them? Oh, okay.
The daily rate for what?
It's high, but not as high as Lincoln Hills. Now we'll talk about the type 1 facilities that are not yet operational, and most have not been built yet. So there's an ongoing process in order to close Lincoln Hills. Now, the Dane County facility is in the planning design stage. It's designed to be completed in 2029. The original funding request that the Department of Corrections requested to build that facility was $93 million. $83 million. They denied that request. Because of the cost of inflation and the cost of labor and supplies and materials, the eventual funding cost to taxpayers that was approved is $130.7 million. So we can all see where procrastination leads. It leads to more money being spent by the taxpayers. The Northern Wisconsin type facility that's going to be operated by the DOC is still in the planning and design stage, and the funding request has not yet been approved. Now, the Milwaukee Southeast Regional Care Center for Youth Type 1 facilities, operated by the Department of Correction, is new construction, completion in 2026, so a little bit later this year. The original funding request was $46 million to build the facility. That was denied. The eventual cost to taxpayers, $88 million. Procrastination cost. So as of the most recent reporting, Wisconsin holds roughly about 23,300 people in our state prisons. Many facilities are operating above capacity, so we all know that our jails are at its limit. Combined probation and parole population in 2025 is approximately 400 people under supervision in the community. Now, in 2024, over 8,000 people were admitted to the Wisconsin prisons. About 60% of those admissions involved revocations and supervision rather than new convictions. Black residents in Wisconsin are incarcerated roughly 11 to 12 times the rate of white residents, one of the highest racial disparities in the nation. Extended supervision and revocations contribute substantially to prison's return. Technical violations remain a large driver for repeat incarceration. The jail population statewide is roughly 10,207 for statewide. For a total of 1,502 women, 807,005 men. And the juvenile boys, we talked about the 88 boys and the 10 girls.
Real quick, could I jump in?
Got those notes.
So, real quick for the folks, raise your hand if you know what crimeless revocation is in this room.
Good job.
Yeah, it's on. For the folks who don't know, crimeless revocations are basically the rules that are set by your parole officer when you are on community supervision, right? So if you're on a bracelet or if you are just simply on probation, those are the rules that they set as the conditions for you to be able to be in communities. That literally can be anything. That can be not having liquor in your house. That can be not being, being with someone who has a weapon. That could be not driving a car. That could be not seeing this specific person in your life. And that could, it could be a gambit of things. We have a lot of folks who have faced crimeless revocations in our state because of really crazy situations. One of the stories I love to bring up is an example of a person who went upstairs. They lived in a duplex. They went upstairs in the duplex, which was outside the bounds of their
Dwelling.
of their dwelling, right? And you have to be within the bounds of your dwelling at a certain time. When they broke that, they were sent back to jail for going upstairs in the house that they lived in, right? So when we look back at that number of crimeless revocations, that is a huge issue that our state has, and it's costing people a lot of money. And that's not public safety, right? Raise your hand if you were here for the Day of Empathy on Tuesday. Right. If you weren't here, please come next year. There are fierce advocates that come and they advocate every year to improve our criminal legal system and save taxpayers' dollars and keep our community safe. The reason why I want to uplift crimeless revocations is specifically because that is substantially leading to our criminal legal system bursting at the seams. If we continue our current trajectory, we will have to build a new prison in the state of Wisconsin, which would mean we will cost the state billions of dollars in an effort to keep folks safe.
The other thing with crimeless revocation too is that the state is lazy and sometimes they use that as a cost-saving measure. Sometimes individuals do commit new crimes, but they don't charge them with new crimes because if they have extended supervision or time left, it's just a cost-saving measure for them to revoke them, put them back in jail rather than charge them with a new crime. The other thing that does is that you don't necessarily get accuracy when you talk about the crimes that are being committed if they're not actually charging. So sometimes they use that as a cost-saving measure. Persons in our care, effective January 31st, 2026, a total of 23,347 people. Now, when we talk about probation, parole, and extended supervision, it's roughly 62,119 people. But when you add in the interstate compact and parole, that number hits over 63,000 individuals currently on paper. Personal safety. So gun homicides, assaults, and shootings by police cost Wisconsin $9 billion each year, amounting to more than $1,500 per person in the state. So Milwaukee Police Department in 2025 confiscated 3,020 guns, of which 2,580 were evidence guns. In 2025, Milwaukee reported 142 homicides, an increase of 8% from 132 in 2024. In 2025, Milwaukee also reported 515 non-fatal shootings, a 19% decrease from the previous year of 639. So, Black residents comprise of roughly 6.3% of the population, but accounted for 75.5% of firearm homicides. This is just a breakdown of the guns confiscated per zip code, with the highest amount of guns being confiscated in 53218, the lowest 53226. So firearm related homicides, now specifically for firearm related homicides, it was 126. The 142 was all inclusive. This represents that breakdown in numbers per zip code, with the highest zip code being 53209, the lowest being 53202. Non-fatal shootings, roughly 515, and we all know that non-fatal shootings mean that you were just blessed enough not to die. You still got shot. So the highest zip code for non-fatal shootings is 53206 with 81. The smallest is 53207 and 53214, tied at just one shooting per year. Crash data, the fatal fatalities that we see, 55 in 2025. Hit and run crashes, 5,442, a total of 14,313 for all crashes. Reckless driving and tows. In 2025, reckless vehicles were 983, arrest 1,047, reckless driving citations with speeding, we're looking at 12,591. So our plans for the criminal justice reform, our goal is to end mass incarceration cycles and create a fair, rehabilitative criminal justice system. Our priorities is to reform sentencing guidelines to focus on rehabilitation and lower recidivism, expand reentry programs for employment, housing, and education opportunities, invest in alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenses, increase transparency and community oversight of law enforcement practices, banning slavery in this state, ending crimeless revocation, fully funding our courts so that all communities have access to fair justice system, legalize and decriminalize cannabis so that communities wronged can reclaim their lives and reduce our prison population. Real quickly, I just want to mention that right now there is a bill, I believe it's SB 546, if we could look that up. Basically, what that bill does is it assigns judges, assistant district attorneys, and assistant district attorneys and public defenders around the entire state. In that legislation, Milwaukee was supposed to receive 4 assistant district attorneys, 4 public defenders, and 6 public defenders support staff. My staff is looking up the.
That's right.
Oh,
I got it right, y'all.
because of a petty disagreement. And I mean petty disagreement. And y'all need to hear me, because y'all need to hear how this building contributes to a lot of our public safety issues. Because of a petty disagreement with the organization called Enough is Enough, the public defenders wrote a letter to the judiciary saying that the organization Enough is Enough, they felt, was an extension of the district attorney's office. Enough is Enough was created, and rightfully so, for a lady who lost her life that was pregnant. Her name was Erin, and I want to say her last name was Morganson, but I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. She was killed from a driver who was fleeing police. And that was a catastrophic loss for that family and for our state as well, because we all know somebody who has had their life taken because of a reckless driver. And it's even worse when it's a product of a police chase, right? So the public defender's office did an open records request and found at least, I think, 258 pieces of mail between the district attorney's office and Enough is Enough. So they wrote a letter saying that when you consider these impact statements and the request for maximum confinement, we want you to take into consideration that we believe that this is a product of an extension of the Assistant District Attorney's Office. So, of course, the Assistant District Attorney's Office responded and said that that's not the case. I met these individuals when I was on the campaign trail. We did a public service by showing them the correct way to petition the court, which they would typically do for anybody. Bob Donovan got involved, demanded an apology from the public defender's office. Long story short, Milwaukee County is now going to receive 4 assistant district attorney's office. They did an amendment to take out the public defenders, the 4 public defenders and the 6 support staff. What does that mean? That means people who are waiting in jail for public defenders will take longer for them to get. It also means that everyone who's charged has a right to a speedy trial, their 6th Amendment right. You can't continue to put these court cases off and not provide that trial with eventually those individuals walking. Every time a court date is postponed, it costs taxpayers roughly $17,000. The other piece that you need to hear me is that in the state of Wisconsin, there is a rule that says if you have 2 or more people that are related to one case, if one person gets a public defender, the other individual has to get a private attorney, and the state pays for that because it is considered a conflict of interest. The rates that they use to base who gets a public defender are 2009 poverty rates. So you have a lot of people who are indigent, but they don't qualify for a public defender. So in an effort to keep these cases on speed or on time, the judges will reach out and call attorneys for themselves to get these people represented. That means that cost is then passed on to the county. The state is legally obligated to provide public defenders when they need it. Every time the county pays, we don't. So when you see these surpluses, the question is, what are they not paying for? So that's something that you need to keep in mind. So when people talk about our crime, what are the people in this building doing to help? They're not. Because a petty disagreement means that they are trumping the public safety for over 900,000 people. That's the issue. And the public defenders were assigned over 12,000 cases in 2025 alone. Now, Wisconsin is aging. We're getting old, y'all. So Wisconsin population has been on the decline since 2020. The share of residents aged 65 or older is growing rapidly. Wisconsin is losing young adults, especially between the ages of 18 and 26. At one point, we had lost over 100,000 26-year-olds in a 10-year period. So what does that mean? Milwaukee City's population is on the decline since 2020, from 577,000 to roughly 500 individuals. So in Representative Drake's district, she lost roughly 15,389 residents. In mine, I lost 16,528. You cannot live on the north side of Milwaukee without living in either my district or Representative Drake's district. So that means that our north side districts are declining, where other districts that represent Milwaukee have seen increases. Disparity in health, especially among lead, is extremely high. 65,000 Milwaukee homes are now connected to lead water lines. As of 2025, we've done a good job replacing some of those lead lines, but all lead lines are required to be replaced by 2037. 2,600 lead laterals were replaced in 2024, so we're slowly but surely getting there. 68% of the 262,000 housing units in Milwaukee currently have lead paint. 17,000 housing units were built prior to 1940 and are considered high risk for lead paint hazards. Now, Milwaukee County tested 29,155 children for lead, 2,724 cases, or 9.34%, had elevated blood lead levels either greater than the 3.5 micrograms per deciliters. Children ages 3 to 6 had the largest number of cases at a rate of 83.5 per 1,000, and 7.99% of children aged 1 to 2 tested positive as suggested earlier, and their detection rates for the state. 13,210 tests were taken by children who identified as being Black. 1,717 were confirmed to have elevated lead levels greater than the 3.5 micrograms. The results equal 13% of children tested being positive for lead poisoning at a rate of 129.98 per 1,000. Now, 44,800 tests were taken by children who identified as being white, with just 1,253 were confirmed to have elevated lead levels of greater than the 3.5 micrograms. The results equal 3% of children tested being positive for lead poisoning at a rate of 27.96 per 1,000.
And Senator Johnson, if you're gonna just tell them, what does that mean for our children when they have a high exposure to lead in the education as well as their physical growth?
It means decreased cognitive development for a lot of those children. Lead levels, especially in children that are significantly young, like 1 and 2 years old, can cause severe cognitive delays later on. The other thing that you need to be aware of is that we don't start testing until kids are 1. We don't test pregnant women. So all of these are contributors, and we stop testing at age 6. So when you talk about lead levels, there very well can be kids out there a lot older with much higher lead levels. We just don't know because we don't test.
And real quick, lead has been also known to lead to non-disjunction, which refers to an issue on your X chromosome, right? Which leads to different long-term mental disorders, right? So as you think about the long-term health of our communities and the increased cost in healthcare, right? Long-term, right? When you have a child who suffers from a non-disjunction, right? You are often having to take care of that child for the rest of their life, and then set up a system after you die, right? In transition, to take care of them long-term. Right?
And the criminal justice system.
That's what I spent a lot.
Yeah.
Precisely. So as you think about, not only the cost to a family over a lifetime, but the cost to the state by not addressing an issue like our lead laterals in our communities, we are costing the entire state substantial amounts of resources and leading into the long-term harms in our public safety system.
And the 5 Milwaukee zip codes with the highest lead levels were 53215, 53208, 53206, 53204, and 53210. Now, our environmental and infrastructure needs, our goal is to build resilient, sustainable communities with safe roads, clean air, and affordable housing. Replace lead service lines, remove lead-based paint hazards, and upgrade aging infrastructure to ensure safe drinking water and housing. Invest in road and bridge repair with safety-focused standards and to protect communities and reduce long-term cost. Expand energy and efficiency and sustainable housing to lower utility bills and increase access to sustainable and safe homes. Advance climate resilient efforts, including green infrastructure that reduces flooding and environmental risk in vulnerable areas, address environmental justice concerns for improving water quality and reducing industrial pollution in historically impacted communities. The one thing that you need to know about lead is that it goes in 3 forms: paint, water, soil. So paint, because of the older homes that we see in Milwaukee, Water is second, soil is third. The other thing that y'all need to remember about those gardens, it's wonderful to plant gardens in your yard, but use raised beds. Because the other thing that they don't talk about is that, especially in Milwaukee, because of the older housing stock, when the lead paint falls off the houses, it goes into the soil. So if you are planting directly in that soil, you need to be planting stuff that needs to be peeled and you don't eat the outside.
Yeah.
But just to be safe, use raised beds. And that's coming from somebody who don't garden because I don't spend time like that.
And real, specifically as it relates to that point, it's not just the peel piece, right? As a person who does garden a lot,
Thank you.
and I did care deeply about environmental issues, right? When you grow plants in contaminated soils, those plants absorb the nutrients of that soil, which means that the contaminants are being absorbed into that produce. And when you consume that, you're consuming those contaminants. Lead is not the only contaminant that you have to deal with in terms of soil contamination, right? You have carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals that are in our soils. We live Milwaukee is a hugely formerly industrial city. A lot of the land that we have homes on is contaminated soil, right? If land remediation did not occur when that home was built, you are dealing with soil that isn't ideal for that situation. So raised beds are even more important. You've had developments in housing that have had to close their doors because of carcinogens.
Yes.
That aren't caused by that development, right? So, for example, in Kalen's district, in Latanya's district, you have Community in Corridor. What's right across the street from Community in the Corridor? Master Lock. Master Lock for years, right? Due to their production, pushed plenty of contaminants into the ground that led to contaminants being all over properties, not just theirs, but the surrounding ones, leading to issues with carcinogens long term, which led to that property not being able to be opened up fully. Did Master Lock pay for those remediations? No. They closed their doors and left. Did we have state laws that forced them to do that? No. Right? So a bigger structural issue as it relates to the long-term development of our communities is that if we do not address contaminants and holding businesses accountable who contaminate our soils and our communities, we will have to pay the price. Because populations, we want to live, the mayor of Milwaukee has a goal of making the city a city of 1 million. That means that we will be building more housing to accommodate that. That means that we will be building on top of those spaces with more contaminated soil, which means that puts the safety and well-being of every single person in this room and our families at risk long term. So unless the state takes responsibility to pass laws that create real protections for our communities, we will continue to put people in harm's way.
So next we'll talk about Milwaukee County disparities in life expectancies. So Black people have the second shortest average lifespan, life expectancy at birth. For over a decade in Milwaukee County, per the medical examiner's office, the average age of death for Black residents has been at least 10 years or more lower than that of their white counterparts. December 2025, they did a rolling estimate, which meant that they looked at the death rates just for December. The average age of death for Blacks, 59 years old. The average age out of 30 deaths for that single month, the average age was 59. December 2025, the 12-month rolling average deaths for white was 73.79 years of age out of 23 deaths for a single month. Now, this is a list of the top 10 adjusted causes of death by race in Milwaukee in 2023. The first, heart disease. Second, cancer. 3, accidents. Chronic lower respiratory infection. 6 was Alzheimer's. 10 was Parkinson's. Now, that was for white people. Let's look at Black people. Number 1, heart disease. Number 2, cancer. Number 3, accidents. Number 4, assaults and homicide. Number 5, cardiovascular disease. But number 6 for us is diabetes. Number 7 for them, suicide, us, chronic lower respiratory disease. And so you can see that based on our races, those 10 things can differ dramatically. Now, Milwaukee has a lower life expectancy for Blacks than the rest of Wisconsin for the same population. Lower life expectancy is more prevalent in neighborhoods with high concentrations of unstable housing, poverty, and lack of preventive health care, such as primary care doctors and healthcare facilities. Most prevalent in those zip codes are like 53206 and 53204. Life expectancy has shown gradual improvement over time, but the gap between Blacks and whites still have remained relatively unchanged. Gun homicides and mortality. So gun homicides contribute drastically as a cause of death among Black men in Milwaukee and are the second leading cause of mortality for this population. Despite Black residents accounting for just 6% of Wisconsin's population, Blacks make up approximately 75.5% of homicide victims statewide. Each homicide victim loses an estimated of 44 years of life. Now, the second leading cause, overdoses, are responsible for roughly 20% of all the years of life lost in Milwaukee. Older Black men born 1951 to 1970, I know this is a shocker for people because it was a shocker for me, are 14 times more likely to experience drug poisoning deaths, which is higher than the national average. Overdoses shorten life expectancy by 27 years. Now, disparities in chronic illnesses. The chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, asthma, kidney disease, these are preventable deaths. 47.7% of diabetes deaths per 100,000 for African Americans in Wisconsin, which is 2.7 times more likely for Black Wisconsinites to die from diabetes than their white counterparts. 249 heart disease deaths per 1,000 for African Americans in Wisconsin, 66.9 strokes per 100,000 for African Americans, 2 times higher risk for Black children to develop asthma than white children. Now, disparities in sexual health, I won't be Debbie Downer, but y'all, this is real. This is real. 31,576 reported STI cases in Wisconsin in 2024. Black Wisconsinites have 15 times higher chlamydia rates compared to white Wisconsinites. 68% of gonorrhea cases in Wisconsin were among Black residents. 31 babies were born with congenital syphilis in 2024, 18 of which were Black. Yeah. And 68% of new HIV diagnoses were people of color. So when we talk about chlamydia rates of chlamydia infections are 1,094 per 1,000 residents. Blacks have 6 times greater risk of chlamydia infection than our white counterparts in Milwaukee. Black residents accounted for 66% of the 10,023 chlamydia infections. Whites accounted for 11%. When we look at gonorrhea, it don't get no better. Milwaukee residents contract gonorrhea almost 10 times higher than the white population. 78% of the 4,333 gonorrhea cases are in Milwaukee were contracted by Blacks, and 8% of those total cases were from the white population. Now there.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Senator. I want y'all to hear from me other than me just sneezing over in the corner. Swear it's just allergies.
We're talking about STI. Because if somebody just to look, that was the blackest thing I could do, but when someone just looks at that raw data, there may be those who would leap to conclusions that there's some kind of moral deficiency amongst Black people, that we're just out here doing more. Is there something that is causing these numbers to be higher than our white counterparts? It's all.
know what's driving these numbers, but what I do know is that individuals having children is decreasing. Wisconsin's population is decreasing. That means younger people are deciding not to have children, but the STIs are going up. So what does that mean? That means that they're using contraception, but they're not necessarily using condoms.
Yeah, and
So
Absolutely.
y'all just need to be real careful. That's all I got to say about
I
that.
don't know if you have up there, Senator, does it has the age? Because coming from like a school background too, a lot of it, to be honest, was like the misinformation and education of contraceptives, STIs, and things of that nature. And the fact that it goes also into health disparities. Sometimes people will have something without knowing it. When they finally did find out, it was either too late that they have it without having the preventative measures, right? So that goes into our health disparities too, in communities of color as well too, the miseducation and misinformation of it as well too.
So, real quick, raise your hand if you're under the age of 30 in the room.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you've
Remember
been
back that
to,
far.
if you've been to your doctor in the past 2 months.
Yes, this one to tell you right now.
Word.
Right.
So holistically, as you look at healthcare disparities amongst Black folks, one, healthcare access is a huge
The
issue
next
that we
one is
have
to 2:30. That's
we have in our community. There are the amount of healthcare access points that are in neighborhoods has decreased substantially. And two, our relationship with primary care providers has decreased,
Mhm.
right? The amount of folks that we have that look like us that are in healthcare, that is not growing at a rapid rate, and that is actually moving in a direction that is declining, and has been declining over the past 5 years, especially under the auspice of the previous Trump administration and the current administration. And then you pair that with the fact that you have entities like Planned Parenthood that are going through its situations, which are often the primary access point for especially folks of color to get contraception, right? So yes, there has been a decline in the amount of interest of Black folks and young people in general having
Yes.
children, but access to contraceptives have been decreasing at a rapid rate in our communities under the auspice of a federal administration that feels that contraception access leads to more abortions, which isn't logical.
Abortions. That's what I was gonna say. Isn't the fact that maybe the population is going down and because there is actually a rise in abortion? Do we have those statistics? And then I just have one other quick question. As far as prevention, what are we doing as far as tracking and responding to truancy? Truancy would help us change a lot of it. If we would address truancy.
So one of the things that we do know isn't necessarily that the population is going down because people are having more abortions, is that people are Oh, no, I'm saying people are deciding not to have people are deciding not to have families. And when you have over 100,000 26-year-olds moving in a 10-year period, that means that's usually when people decide to settle down, get married, have kids. They're choosing places other than Wisconsin. The other thing too is that I forgot my second train of thought. I can't remember. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on real quickly through the disparities for moms and babies. I think I have 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
But 14.3 Black infant deaths per 1,000 live births in Wisconsin compared to just 4.4 of white infant deaths per 1,000 live births. 16.8% of Black babies are born with low birth weight compared to just 7.9% statewide. Black women are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth or complications than white people. 21% of pregnancy-related deaths are Black women. And Black babies are 3 times more likely to die before their first birthday in Wisconsin. Now, one of the things that we did do last week, Thursday, was that we expanded postpartum care. It That's huge. Before, it would only last up to 60 days after the birth. Now it at least goes 12 months. That's enough time for women to be diagnosed with whatever complications they're having, and enough time to make sure that these women are okay after childbirth. Um, so some of these slides, in 2024, Milwaukee's 12.9% preterm birth rate earned us the grade of an F based on data collected from the March of Dimes report card, while Wisconsin received a C with an average rate of 10%. Now, Black infants in Milwaukee are 2.9 times more likely to die before their first birthday. That's where the rounded off 3% comes from. Almost 56% of infants in Black families are the result of complications due to prematurity. So when we talk about children dying before their first birthday, a large part of that has to do with premature birth. I'll skip over this one and go quickly to disparities in mental health. In 2023, about 18% of youth ages 12 to 17 experienced major depressive episodes, and 9.5% of high school students reported attempting suicide in the past year. Black residents in Wisconsin are 23.9% more likely to be hospitalized for self-harm injuries than white residents, and only 23% of Black adults with mental health needs reported receiving treatment in the past year, compared to 43% of white adults. Now, in a 2022 Kids Count data book produced by the Ann E. Casey Foundation, 26% of Black kids, 22% of Latino kids, and 60% of Native American kids were diagnosed with or reported to have depression or anxiety. It, this is compared to just 15% of white kids, which means the percentage of Black kids who were diagnosed with depression or anxiety was 1.73 times higher. So when you look at 2023's Behavioral Risk Factor and Surveillance System, or BRFSS, the most recent data suggested that mental health needs among Black adults are 1.5 to 2 times less likely than their white counterparts to be treated. This is less than half the rate of white adults seeking treatment. Now, some of the barriers that prevent some of us from receiving mental health coverage is that in 2023, a study found that 16% of Black adults reported that they or their family member had problems paying their medical bills. So cost and not having enough money plays a huge need, compared to just 10% of whites and 5% of Asians. So out of Wisconsin's 72 counties, 52 of those counties, or 72.2% of the state, are in a mental health shortage area, HPSA. This has even greater impact on those living in high poverty areas. In 2023, about 27.48% of Black people living in Wisconsin were living in poverty. About 94,469 Black people, compared to just 9% of the white population. So Milwaukee's poverty rate was about 38%. We know for our children, which is about 4.3 times higher than that of white residents in 2023. So the goal of healthcare and mental health is to ensure every Wisconsin has access to affordable, comprehensive healthcare and mental health support. Our priorities is to expand Badger Care eligibility and mental health coverage, particularly for youth and seniors, establish a public option for healthcare, increase funding, community-based clinics and mobile health units in underserved areas, launch statewide suicide prevention and gun violence intervention initiatives, and address mental health disparities, and invest in cultural competency. Democracy and civic engagement. None of these disparities will change if Black people in our community, and too often, don't reach out and try to help. Because the reality is that in this building, not only are the people you see up here what we have for the African American community, we're talking about all communities of color. So one of the things that you can do is to do your part, not only hold us accountable, but show up. show up when it comes to legislation that is going to be balanced off the backs of our communities. And we see that too often in this building. So the Black Caucus is committed to protecting and empowering voices of all Wisconsinites in the democratic process. Our priorities are establishing a Wisconsin John Lewis Voting Rights Act, to ensure fair electoral maps and gerrymandering practices, strengthen voting rights protections, including early voting access and multilingual materials, expand civic education and community-led voter outreach programs, and support local diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and representation in governance. And we all know how they feel about DEI. So with that being said, that's the end of this presentation. Now on Monday, these slides will be available. I need to do a little bit of cleanup because I was adding slides up until the last minute. We were editing things before you guys walked in, but we will make sure that all of these are available.
For preventative, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna address it?
Truancy and absenteeism is a huge issue. We see that absenteeism is a for sure indicator of kids going into the criminal justice system. Truancy is a major issue, but you also have to realize in the state of Wisconsin, legally, you can be homeschooled. So while that is a huge issue, there are a lot of other things that are also pressing. But one of the things that, in my personal opinion, that we need to be concentrating more in terms of education is property tax levies. Because there is a gap in our educational system, especially in our communities that have and our communities that don't. When you look at places like in Milwaukee 53206, where because of inflation and stuff now, some of those houses sell between $17,000 and $88,000. But you have communities like Mequon, where the median resale value is of a home in that area is $700,000. How does that educational system compare? And especially when you have high poverty rate areas like Milwaukee, where over 86% of the students are disadvantaged. Another thing that we need to concentrate more on is recruiting minority teachers in all facets. Minority educators matter, but in this building, we tend to think that they don't. Yeah. As much as they complain about MPS in this building and our lack of education, MPS is over 90% Black, but the teachers are over 70% white. So we need to make sure that we're not widening those gaps or further causing disparities because of the decisions that we make in this building. And we see that all the time.
And I want to answer a little bit more. I see folks moving through the room. We're going to have a group photo. So if folks stay just for a couple minutes. But to answer your question as well, there was a task force on truancy that was established a couple years ago. One of the things that we did recognize is that there is no statewide definition of what truancy actually is. And so because of that, you have different communities respond to it differently. We heard the need for obviously providing transportation and more robust preventative measures to address that very issue. But with that, let's give Senator Johnson another round of applause for saying.
Thank you.